In this week's the News, Coalition smashes record set by both previous national governments. Labour says it's backing small business, but media needs time to find someone to help them disagree. MSD decides not to reward making people homeless anymore, and space debris is coming for us. Do we need to prepare for an alien invasion? All that and more on this week's the News. Hello there, kia ora, welcome to this week's the News. I'm Paul, and please hold your screens of terror until after the show. Unemployment hits an 11-year high this week as the Coalition's aggressive austerity measures, public sector redundancies and infrastructure spending halts are driving joblessness upwards, with new record levels announced this week showing the highest unemployment rate in 11 years of 5.6% and the largest number of people unemployed since the time of euthanasia in the 90s. But don't worry about people not having money, because there's also fewer places for people to spend the no money they have, with record business liquidations also announced this week. Said the Finance Minister, Nicola Willis, seen here asking for tips on how to spend lots of money on boats that never arrive at their destination from an expert. People are doing it tough. They might need to stop going to the cinema and getting Ben & Jerry's now and just settle for cheap local ice cream instead. Labour this week released its Small Business Action Plan, which is designed to ensure speedier processes for payments from big businesses to SMEs, a more targeted investment program and a change to GST thresholds. The plan was fully costed by reutilising money currently budgeted for the Investment Boost scheme. Media coverage was sluggish though, as media kept looking for people who would criticise the plan, settling on an accountant from Deloitte who pointed out that tax thresholds are a holdover from when GST was first instigated in the 80s, before home computers were a thing. So clearly panic stations are required for all of us. To apologise or not to apologise? That was the question Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, seen here greeting young New Zealand First members in the ways with which they are accustomed, after comments last week calling small and medium enterprise owners babies who need to grow up. After the comments, Luxon doubled down on not needing to apologise. Former national candidates like Rotorua's Mayor Tanya Tapsell came out in support of him when he did apologise on Monday night, with his MPs suddenly now saying it was the right thing to do. Said a spokesperson for his office, "We clearly know how decisive the Prime Minister is, and we agree or disagree with statements that may or may not accept or deny responsibility for actions which might or might not have offended people who may or may not matter depending on if they do or do not vote for us." Christopher Luxon, seen here showing us the best method for puppeteering in case any future coalition partners need to know for some reason, raised the possibility of holding a referendum on the mixed member proportional or MMP electoral system alongside a 4-year parliamentary term vote in what started off as an off-the-cuff response to a right-wing talkback host and has somehow ballooned into a surprise policy for the National Party that they're all doubling down on. National were already pursuing a referendum on the possibility of a 4-year term, which they stopped doing in February without a reason given. While National Party MPs have blindly nodded along to media queries on the topic, in shock it was being suggested, National's coalition partners were less impressed by the suggestion that they would lose their most pliant partner and the representation MMP affords them, with Winston Peters saying MMP may look like DEI to some, but that's woke, so we oppose it. Yeah, so that's also bad. Look, stop lying like a flatfish and stop asking questions, Sonny Jim. Opposition parties are calling for Foreign Minister Winston Peters, seen here trying out the greeting his young New Zealand First members use and not quite getting it right enough, and not to be mistaken apparently with New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters, seen here being asked why he supports violence when it suits him before having a meltdown at media, to be stripped of his portfolio after telling Green MP Lawrence Yunnan to go back to your own country during question time. MPs, observers and our largest trading partners say Peters' xenophobic rhetoric undermines Aotearoa's social cohesion and international credibility, while Prime Minister Christopher Luxon's reluctance to enforce strict accountability demonstrates that he lacks a spine, and he knows that Peters is all that really keeps him propped up in the job. The Crimes Act Amendment Bill has passed its final reading, granting business owners and staff expanded legal powers to detain suspected shoplifters, adding another nail in the coffin of protecting human safety from this government as it once again prioritises commercial property protection over people's safety and risks dynamic escalations, racial profiling and vigilantism in retail spaces that ignores the symptoms of economic distress to put in place punitive measures rather than dealing with root causes of crime like poverty, said Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith, seen here showing you that he thinks having a whiteboard makes him look smarter than Simeon Brown. Yes, that is correct. Local government is revolting, and also they're revolting, says Local Government Minister Simon Watts, seen here trying to impersonate wrestling era Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, as amalgamation plan deadlines loom this weekend, and a number of local government authorities unable to or unwilling to sign up for the government's Head Start scheme to move forward with plans councils were given severely limited time to consult on with voters, leading to many of the sector claiming it's not possible to proceed knowing that they have the backing of voters, especially since amalgamations will not lower costs, will not increase access to services, and will decrease the wider public's access to democracy. Some opponents have even claimed that this action feels like retaliation for local governments speaking out against reforms in the past from central government and making decisions that have increased ratepayer costs, like cancelling Three Waters, and the majority of voters choosing to retain Māori wards after having referendums forced on dozens of councils last year at an expense that none of the councils wanted, said Local Government Minister Simon Watts. Yes, that is correct. National is reaping the rewards of a law around anonymous large political donations. It has been revealed after the party banked $316,000 this quarter thanks to a law electoral experts have been calling on for the abolition of for years. Currently, donations up to $61,425 can be given anonymously without public scrutiny, which are given through the Electoral Commission and handed to parties. Under this law, donors are prohibited from admitting that they donated or the reason for the donation. The 2023 Independent Electoral Review final report called for the abolition of the scheme, which Labor chose not to do at the time because of the immediate lead up to the last election, and Paul Goldsmith has decided that a report from Labor is probably too woke to be of any use, while his party rakes in hundreds of thousands in donations. Controversial performance targets linked to reducing the use of emergency housing have been dropped by MSD after widespread outrage at the system which incentivised MSD staff to deny help where needed. At the time, Emergency Housing Minister Tama Potaka, seen here sitting through another anti-co-governance tirade against an organisation he worked for but has to hide the hurt the comments are causing, said this was an operational choice that he had no say over, while staff told media it was policy based on government directives. Now, this change has been implemented. It's unknown yet if Potaka will now say this is operational, or if he'll take credit, citing being an election year and frozen homeless people are less likely to vote for them. The Prime Minister, seen here in his Uber, has this week been left to defend himself after it was revealed he spent close to $20 million on the use of Air Force transport for getting around the country, including flying to National Party events and a Kmart warehouse opening. The Prime Minister justified the use by saying, "You might not know it, but I used to run an airline, which means I can't collect air points, and I figured this was just the best way to ensure that others can collect those points." The Prime Minister, seen here failing at his efforts to whistle, is currently considering pitches for which one-on-one leaders debate he'll attend for this election, marking the first time a sitting Prime Minister has seemingly refused to attend more than a single televised debate. The Prime Minister, who shortened the time for post-cabinet press conferences, reduced time for direct questioning from media outside the House on the tiles, has refused to go on Q&A with Jack Tame for over a year, cancelled Monday morning interviews with Tova O'Brien, and refuses to do any media that isn't easy on him giving him softball interviews, has claimed he's the most accessible Prime Minister we've ever had. Insiders in his office say that he's leaning towards the proposal from TV3, which would let the Herald's Ryan Bridge fawn over him for the debates while interrupting Chris Hipkins before he can answer, as the Prime Minister's current preferred option. Questions have been raised about the Financial Market Authority appointee Trevor James, seen here cosplaying as Richie Cunningham's dad from Happy Days, who was a recent recipient of the Order of New Zealand and Royal Honours for services to finances, which included being a director of Capital Plus Merchant Finance, a finance company that had falsified a prospectus to hide significant debt and risk to investors, leaving the role just before it was taken to court after investors lost more than $150 million from retirement funds and inheritance. The prosecution of this organisation, where Janes was a signatory of their falsified prospectus, fell to the FMA, which Janes is now a board member of. Said a spokesperson for the Prime Minister, Yeah, weird how our appointments seem to keep having this mix of being dodgy and rewarded for that by us. I'm sure there isn't a deeper issue there for people to worry themselves about, though. And finally, a meteorite recovered in the Wairarapa this week has been confirmed as the 11th meteorite to hit the country and the 4th to be recovered ever. The rock entered the atmosphere at about 10:30 p.m. on the 28th of July, lighting up the sky and splitting into 4 pieces which were found on farmland north of Masterton. Experts say meteorites are recognisable because of a black crust that they form as they enter the planet's atmosphere. Carterton Mayor Ron Marks said of the discovery, "Well, now I'm back running for New Zealand First. It's clear this is a sign from a higher power that they want us to check what's in your pants before you use bathrooms, and fluoride causes vaccine autism, and we should know we have the best scientists in the country here thinking they found rocks from space, that they were clearly not in space, they were on the ground." Right, and that's it for this week's the news. Please make sure that your details are all up to date at vote.nz so that you can get out and vote this year, because if they're not, you don't get to go out and vote this year. Until next week, look after yourself, ka kite anō, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and we'll see you next time.